The fluorescent lights of the courtroom hummed, a dull counterpoint to the frantic buzzing in my ears. My stomach churned. I shifted in the hard wooden chair, the starched collar of my shirt chafing against my neck. I adjusted my tie, a nervous tic I'd developed over the last few months. Months spent watching, waiting, planning. Months since I'd last felt normal. Mr. Young. Judge Thompson's voice, crisp and authoritative, cut through the fog in my brain. I looked up, meeting her gaze. Yes, Your Honor. Are you ready to proceed? Yes, Your Honor. The words felt thick in my mouth. Ready? Was I ever truly ready for this? This wasn't how I envisioned spending this Tuesday morning. Just 6 months ago, I was planning a wedding, not a lawsuit. Belle Isabella Montgomery was, or rather I thought she was, the perfect fiancée, intelligent, beautiful, successful. He thought she was perfect, until a single missing photo shattered his illusion. The missing photo from her bachelorette party, the one no one seemed to remember being taken. Mr. Young, you've brought suit against Ms. Montgomery alleging breach of contract and fraudulent misrepresentation. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. Across the courtroom, Belle sat ramrod straight, her perfectly coiffed blonde hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Her lawyer, a slick, silver-haired man named Mr. Henderson, whispered something in her ear. She nodded, her expression carefully neutral. A mask. She was so good at wearing masks. My own lawyer, Ms. Evans, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with a steel-trap mind, squeezed my arm reassuringly. We've got this, Kevin. I managed a weak smile. I hoped she was right. The details of the prenuptial agreement, the contract Belle was now so blatantly disregarding, were laid out before the court. It was ironclad. We'd both agreed, in writing, to full financial disclosure. No hidden assets, no secret debts, everything on the table. Transparency, honesty, the foundation of any successful marriage. At least, that's what I'd believed. Mr. Young, can you explain to the court why you believe Ms. Montgomery has violated the terms of this agreement? Judge Thompson asked. I took a deep breath. Your Honor, shortly after our engagement, Ms. Montgomery started exhibiting unusual behavior. Late nights at the office, unexplained absences, secretive phone calls. I initially dismissed these as the stresses of wedding planning, but my voice faltered. This was the hard part, laying bare the cracks in what I had believed was an unbreakable bond. But, Judge Thompson prompted gently, but after her bachelorette party, things escalated. The missing photo, her evasiveness when I questioned her about it, the sudden influx of cash into her personal accounts that she couldn't, or wouldn't, explain. Mr. Henderson rose to his feet. Objection, Your Honor, speculation. Mr. Young has presented no concrete evidence of any wrongdoing on the part of my client. Ms. Evans countered, Your Honor, we intend to present that evidence in due course. Objection overruled. Judge Thompson said, her gaze fixed on me. Mr. Young, please continue. The air in the courtroom felt thick with unspoken accusations. I felt Belle's eyes boring into me, cold and hard, but I pressed on, recounting the weeks leading up to this moment. The meticulously documented discrepancies in her stories, the carefully compiled bank statements, the cryptic text messages I'd managed to recover from her phone. Each piece of the puzzle, seemingly insignificant on its own, formed a damning picture when viewed together. It became clear to me, I continued, my voice gaining strength, that Ms. Montgomery had not been entirely truthful about her financial situation. She had significant assets, businesses, and investments that she had deliberately concealed from me. Assets that, according to the terms of our prenuptial agreement, should have been disclosed. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I saw a flicker of something in Belle's eyes, anger, fear. I couldn't be sure. Mr. Young, Judge Thompson asked, what specific evidence do you have to support these allegations? I have bank statements, Your Honor, showing large sums of money being transferred into Ms. Montgomery's accounts from offshore entities shortly after our engagement. I have business registration documents linking her to several companies she claimed no knowledge of, and I have testimony from several witnesses who can attest to her involvement in these businesses. Mr. Henderson sprang to his feet again. Objection, Your Honor, hearsay. Your Honor, Ms. Evans said calmly, we have sworn affidavits from these witnesses, which we are prepared to submit to the court. The back and forth continued, a legal dance of objections and rebuttals. The courtroom felt like a pressure cooker, the tension building with each exchange. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a play unfold, a play in which I was both the protagonist and the audience. Judge Thompson banged her gavel. Order, Mr. Henderson. I will review the affidavits. Mr. Young, do you have anything further to add at this time? I hesitated. There was one more thing, the final piece of the puzzle, the piece that would solidify my case and expose Belle for the liar she was. Yes, Your Honor, I do. I reached into my briefcase, my hand trembling slightly, and pulled out a thick folder. I have evidence that Ms. Montgomery's purported business trips, the ones she claimed were for work, were actually personal in nature. She was not meeting with clients, as she claimed. She was. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. She was what, Mr. Young? Judge Thompson prompted. I looked directly at Belle, my gaze unwavering. She was with another man. The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Belle's carefully constructed mask finally cracked. A flash of pure, unadulterated rage contorted her features. But it was too late. The seed of doubt had been planted. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was just the beginning. The smell of antiseptic floor cleaner and stale coffee hung heavy in the air. Belle, wrapped in a plush robe, sat across from me at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, but it did nothing to dispel the shadow that had fallen over our relationship. Anything interesting? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Just Instagram, she replied, not looking up. Everyone's posting pictures from the bachelorette weekend. My stomach tightened. The bachelorette party, the source of this gnawing unease. Find any good ones of you? I asked, trying to sound casual. One bachelorette party, one deleted photo, and a meticulously planned revenge. Oh, tons, she said, finally glancing up at me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. But most of them are, well, let's just say they're not exactly social media appropriate. This evasion prickled at me. Before the weekend, Belle had been ecstatic about sharing every detail of her friend's bachelorette party. Now, she was suddenly reticent. I'd love to see some, I pressed, my smile feeling strained. Even the inappropriate ones, she laughed, a little too high-pitched. Maybe later, she said, returning to her phone. Right now, I'm starving. Pancakes. The change in subject felt abrupt, a deliberate deflection, but I played along. Sounds great, I said, pushing down the rising tide of suspicion. As Belle busied herself with the pancake batter, my mind drifted back to a moment from my childhood. It was a stark, vivid memory, etched into the deepest recesses of my being. Flashback_1. I was maybe 8 years old, standing in the doorway of my father's study, the rich scent of leather and pipe tobacco filling the air. My younger brother, Mark, 2 years my junior, was perched on my father's knee, a miniature replica of a Wall Street tycoon in a crisp, new suit. Look at my boy, my father boomed, beaming with pride. Isn't he the spitting image of success? He ruffled Mark's hair, the gesture brimming with affection. I shuffled into the room, clutching a drawing I had painstakingly created, a fantastical landscape of dragons and castles, rendered in vibrant crayon hues. Dad, look what I made, I announced, eager to share my creation. My father glanced at the drawing, his smile fading. That's nice, Kevin, he said, his tone flat, devoid of the enthusiasm he'd showered on Mark. He turned back to my brother. Now, Mark, tell me about that science project you're working on. Mark launched into a detailed explanation of his volcano model, using words like hypothesis and chemical reaction that were far beyond my comprehension. My father listened intently, nodding and asking questions, while my drawing, still clutched in my hand, felt like a worthless piece of paper. See, Kevin, my father said, after Mark had finished his explanation. This is what real achievement looks like, not childish drawings. The words stung, a sharp slap to my budding artistic spirit. I retreated to my room, tears welling in my eyes, the drawing now crumpled in my fist. The memory of that moment, the blatant favoritism, the dismissal of my creativity, had remained a festering wound, a constant reminder of my perceived inadequacy. Belle's voice jolted me back to the present. Kevin, earth to Kevin, she said, waving a spatula in front of my face. You okay? You seem miles away. I forced a smile. Just thinking, I said, taking a seat at the island. As we ate, the silence between us was thick with unspoken tension. I watched Belle, her every gesture, every flicker of her expression, searching for clues, for confirmation of the suspicion that was slowly solidifying in my mind. The way she kept glancing at her phone, the way she avoided my gaze, the way her smile seemed forced and brittle, it all added up to a disquieting picture. "So," I said, trying to steer the conversation back to the bachelorette party. "What did you guys get up to? Any crazy stories?" Belle hesitated, taking a sip of her orange juice before answering. "Oh, you know, the usual," she said vaguely. "Spa treatments, some shopping, a few drinks. Nothing too wild." "Come on," I pressed. "There must have been something interesting that happened. Tell me about the groom-to-be's brother. Didn't you say he was going to be there?" I knew from Belle's previous excited chatter that the groom's brother was a notorious party animal. Her sudden lack of enthusiasm about his presence felt off. "Oh, him," she said, her voice a little too casual. "He was there, he's nice," I echoed, raising an eyebrow. "That's not the word I'd use to describe him based on your previous descriptions. I thought he was supposed to be the life of the party." Belle shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "He was tired, I guess," she mumbled, picking at her pancakes. My suspicion hardened into certainty. Something was definitely wrong. The evasiveness, the inconsistencies, the sudden shift in her demeanor, it all pointed to one conclusion. He thought she was perfect, until a single missing photo shattered his illusion. "Belle," I said, my voice low and steady, "I need to know the truth. Did something happen at the bachelorette party that you're not telling me?" She finally looked up at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and defiance. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I leaned forward, my gaze unwavering. "I'm talking about the groom's brother," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm talking about the deleted photos. I'm talking about the lies." I paused, letting the words hang in the air between us, heavy with unspoken accusations. The silence stretched, taut and suffocating, before Belle finally broke down, her carefully constructed facade crumbling around her like a house of cards. Flashback underscore to the stale coffee in the break room tasted like regret. I stared into the swirling brown liquid, seeing not the cheap instant granules, but Belle's face, contorted not in anger, but in that polite, dismissive smile she'd perfected. It was the smile she gave me when I suggested we skip the fancy restaurant and order takeout. The smile she gave me when I talked about my promotion prospects at Peterson and Sons. The smile she gave me when I tried to talk a Buddhist, lost in thought. Kevin. Mark, my then boss, clapped me on the shoulder, his grip firm, almost too firm. "Big presentation today. Ready to wow the Henderson group?" "Yeah," I managed, forcing a smile that felt as brittle as the styrofoam cup in my hand. "Ready as I'll ever be." But I wasn't ready. I was a wreck inside. The Henderson group pitch was supposed to be my stepping stone, my chance to finally prove I was more than just Mr. Peterson's coffee-fetching errand boy. It was my ticket to a corner office, to a future with Belle. I'd envisioned us celebrating with champagne, her eyes sparkling with pride, not that damn polite smile. "You've put in the hours, Kevin," Mark reassured me, his voice dripping with a condescending tone that I hadn't noticed before. "Just stick to the script, and you'll be fine. Stick to the script." That's what Belle had told me too, just a few weeks earlier. "Let's not rock the boat, Kevin," she'd said, her voice soft, her hand resting lightly on my arm. "Your career is important. Let's focus on that right now." We were discussing marriage, or rather, I was discussing marriage. She was deflecting, expertly weaving a tapestry of excuses, all centered around my career, my future, our future. Her words were supportive, but her tone was something else. Something I couldn't quite place at the time. The Henderson presentation went badly, not disastrously, but not well enough. I'd rehearsed it 100 times, knew the figures inside and out, the projections, the market analysis. But I was distracted, my mind replaying Belle's evasive words, her distant smiles. I stumbled over my words, missed a key data point, and fumbled a question from Mr. Henderson himself. Mark, seated beside me, radiated disapproval. I could feel his gaze burning into me, a palpable weight of disappointment. Afterward, in the sterile silence of the conference room, he delivered the post-mortem. "Kevin," he began, his voice low and controlled, "that wasn't your best work." "I know," I mumbled, shame burning in my throat. "Too wasn't feeling well. This wasn't a rehearsal, Kevin. This was the real deal. The Henderson Group represents millions in potential revenue. You had one job. I messed up. I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. I felt like I was back in grade school, being scolded by a teacher. Messed up is an understatement, Mark said, his voice hardening. You blew it. And frankly, I'm surprised. I thought you were better than this. He thought I was better than this. Belle thought I was better than this. I thought I was better than this. The drive home was a blur of self-recrimination. I pulled into the driveway, the house dark and silent. Belle wasn't home. I called her, the phone ringing and ringing, going straight to voicemail. I sank onto the couch, the weight of the day pressing down on me, the silence amplifying my loneliness. Then, I saw it, her phone, lying on the coffee table, forgotten. A notification flashed across the screen, a text message. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached for it. I knew I shouldn't, that it was a violation of her privacy, but the gnawing suspicion in my gut was stronger than my sense of propriety. The message was from a number I didn't recognize. It was short, sweet, and utterly devastating. Dinner was amazing. Can't wait to see you again tomorrow. X. The casual intimacy of it. It was like a punch to the gut. I reread the message, the words blurring through my tears. It wasn't just a message, it was confirmation. Confirmation of my deepest fears, of the subtle shifts in her behavior, the late nights at work, the whispered phone calls. My trust was betrayed, my love tested, but my revenge would be patient. I spent the rest of the night in a daze. The text message burned into my memory. I didn't sleep, I couldn't eat. All I could think about was the betrayal, the lies, the wasted years. And then, a cold, hard resolve began to form. I wouldn't confront her. Not yet. I would play the fool, the unsuspecting fiancé, while I gathered my evidence, planned my strategy. I would make her pay. The next morning, Belle arrived home, her face flushed, her eyes bright. She greeted me with a kiss, her lips brushing my cheek. Sorry I didn't call last night, she said, her voice a little too cheerful. Work ran late. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the woman I loved, but the woman who had deceived me. It's okay, I said, my voice flat, emotionless. I understand, she smiled, that damn polite smile. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do. The Henderson group pitch, my failed presentation, Mark's disappointment, it all faded into the background. This betrayal, was the real challenge, and I would not fail. I would not stick to the script. I would write my own. The stale coffee in the diner mug did little to soothe the gnawing anxiety in my gut. I pushed it away, the metallic tang clinging to the back of my throat. Outside, the pre-dawn sky was a bruised purple, mirroring the turmoil inside me. Belle. How could she? The perfect fiancé, or a master of deception, I had to find out. I tapped the laptop's trackpad, the cool metal a stark contrast to the heat radiating from my clenched jaw. Belle's shared photo album from the bachelorette weekend glowed on the screen, a curated collection of smiling faces and celebratory poses. But something was off. Another refill, Hun, the waitress, a woman with tired eyes and a name tag that read Darlene, gestured towards my empty mug. No, thanks. I'm good, I mumbled, my attention riveted to the screen. There were gaps, discrepancies. Photos I knew had been taken were missing. Specifically, photos from the second night, the night Belle had claimed to have an early night due to a headache. Something on your mind? Darlene leaned closer, her voice softer now. You look like you've seen a ghost. I forced a weak smile. Just work stuff, I lied, minimizing the photo album. Darlene nodded sympathetically, the kind of knowing nod that comes from years of witnessing the human drama unfold in a greasy spoon diner. She refilled my mug anyway, the aroma of burnt coffee filling the air. Sometimes, work's the worst kind of ghost, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Then she moved on, leaving me alone with my spiraling thoughts. The missing photos were just one piece of the puzzle. There were the late-night texts, the hushed phone calls Belle took when she thought I wasn't listening, the vague answers when I asked about the weekend. Each piece, on its own, could be explained away. But together, they formed a damning picture. I reopened the photo album, scrolling through the images again. There was one of Belle and her bridesmaids at a karaoke bar, all smiles and raised glasses. Another showed them posing in front of a neon sign, the name of a club I knew Belle had never mentioned wanting to go to. But the photos from after midnight, the photos I'd seen glimpses of on other bridesmaids' social media feeds, were conspicuously absent. My phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Hesitantly, I opened it. Mr. Young, the message read. I think we need to talk. I have some information about Belle's bachelorette party that you might find interesting. My heart hammered against my ribs. Who was this? How did they know my name? And what did they know about Belle? I typed a reply, my fingers trembling. Who is this? The response came almost immediately. A friend. Meet me at the corner of Elm and Main in an hour. Don't tell Belle. Elm and Main. That was just a few blocks from the diner. A wave of apprehension washed over me. This felt dangerous, like stepping into the unknown. But the gnawing need for answers, the burning desire to know the truth, outweighed my fear. I paid my bill, leaving a generous tip for Darlene, and stepped out into the cool morning air. The sky was beginning to lighten, but a heavy fog hung over the streets, obscuring the familiar landscape. It felt like a metaphor for my situation, shrouded in uncertainty. As I approached the designated corner, I scanned the street, trying to identify my mysterious contact. A figure emerged from the fog, a woman with short, dark hair and a trench coat pulled tight around her. She looked around nervously, her eyes darting from face to face. When she saw me, she approached quickly, her heels clicking on the pavement. Mr. Young, she asked, her voice low and urgent. Yes, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Who are you? My name is Lisa, she said, extending a hand. Her grip was firm, almost aggressive. I was at the bachelorette party, my mind raced. Lisa, I didn't recognize the name. And, I prompted. And I saw what happened, she said, her eyes locking with mine. With Belle, a knot formed in my stomach. What did you see? Lisa took a deep breath, as if steeling herself. Belle wasn't sick that night, she began, her voice barely audible over the sounds of the city waking up. She left the hotel with someone. My blood ran cold. With who? I demanded, my voice tight with barely suppressed rage. Lisa hesitated for a moment, then leaned closer, her words a hushed whisper. With your brother, Daniel. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Daniel, my own brother. It couldn't be true. Daniel and Belle barely knew each other. They'd only met a handful of times at family gatherings. This had to be some kind of mistake. I don't understand, I stammered, my mind reeling. Lisa reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper. She unfolded it carefully and handed it to me. It was a photograph, grainy and poorly lit, but unmistakable. Belle and Daniel, standing outside a hotel room, their arms wrapped around each other in a passionate embrace. The hotel room number was clearly visible in the background. The image seared itself into my brain, a brand of betrayal that I knew I would never forget. The fog around me seemed to thicken, pressing in on me, suffocating me. I struggled to breathe, my chest constricting with a mixture of anger, hurt, and disbelief. I don't know what to say, I finally managed to choke out. You don't have to say anything, Lisa replied, her voice surprisingly gentle. I just thought you deserved to know the truth. She turned and walked away, disappearing back into the fog, leaving me standing there alone, the photograph clutched in my hand. The weight of her revelation crushing me. The rising sun cast long, distorted shadows, turning the familiar streets into a menacing labyrinth. I had been blindsided, betrayed by the two people I trusted most in the world. But in that moment of utter devastation, a flicker of resolve ignited within me. I would not let them get away with this. I would have my revenge. The gavel cracked like a gunshot, echoing through the hushed courtroom. Judge Mallory cleared her throat, adjusting her spectacles. In the matter of Young versus Knox and the estate of Harold Knox, she began, her voice steady and impartial. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. This was it. The culmination of months, years even, of meticulous planning, my revenge. My name, Kevin Young, resonated in my ears, a mantra of vindication. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Kevin Young. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. Belle Knox, my ex-fiancée, went white as a sheet, her perfectly sculpted features contorted in disbelief. Her brother, Silas Knox, sat beside her, his smug expression replaced by a slack-jawed gape. He thought she was perfect, until a single missing photo shattered his illusion. Based on the presented evidence, including the forged will, fraudulent business dealings, and misappropriation of funds, Judge Mallory continued, her voice gaining strength. The court orders the entirety of Harold Knox's estate, including Knox Industries, to be transferred to the rightful heir, Kevin Young. A wave of relief washed over me, so intense it almost buckled my knees. I gripped the edge of the table, grounding myself. It was over. I had won. My lawyer, Ms. Hernandez, placed a reassuring hand on my arm, a small smile playing on her lips. Mr. Young, she whispered, you did it. I nodded, unable to speak. The weight of the past, the burden of betrayal, lifted from my shoulders. I glanced at Belle, her eyes blazing with hatred. She opened her mouth to speak, but Silas placed a restraining hand on her arm, shaking his head. Don't, Belle, he muttered, his voice low and strained. It's over, over. The word echoed in the cavernous courtroom, a final punctuation mark on a chapter of my life I was eager to close. As we filed out of the courtroom, the press swarmed, microphones thrust in my face, questions fired from all directions. I ignored them, my focus solely on the task at hand, rebuilding my life, reclaiming my legacy. Later that evening, I sat in my newly acquired office, the expansive view of the city twinkling beneath me. It was surreal. Just hours ago, I was fighting for scraps, battling to prove my worth. Now, I was at the helm of Knox Industries, the very company my uncle, Harold Knox, had built from the ground up. A knock on the door startled me. It was Silas. He stood in the doorway, his shoulders slumped, his face etched with a mixture of resentment and something else. Regret. Can I come in? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated. What could he possibly want? Sure, I said, gesturing to the chair opposite my desk. He sat down heavily, avoiding my gaze. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken words. Finally, he looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. Kevin, he began, his voice cracking, to need to apologize. I raised an eyebrow, surprised. An apology from Silas, the man who had treated me with disdain and contempt for years. For what? I asked, my voice carefully neutral. For everything, he said, his voice choked with emotion. For doubting you, for siding with Belle, for being a blind fool. He paused, taking a deep breath. I knew about the will, he confessed, his gaze fixed on the floor. Belle manipulated me. She promised me a share of the inheritance, a position of power within the company. He trailed off, shaking his head. I was so blinded by greed, by my own ambition, that I didn't see what she was doing. I didn't see how she was using me, just like she used you. His confession hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I had suspected Silas's complicity, but hearing him admit it, seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes, was a different story altogether. To understand, I said, the words catching in my throat. A strange sense of pity washed over me. Silas, for all his arrogance and bluster, was just another pawn in Belle's game. A victim of her manipulation, just like me. He looked up, surprised. You do, I nodded. I know what it's like to be blinded by someone you trust. To have your faith shattered, your world turned upside down. A memory flashed through my mind, sharp and vivid. Standing in my uncle's study, a few weeks after his death, Belle's arm draped possessively around my shoulder. He always favored you, Kevin, she had purred, her voice laced with false sympathy. He saw you as the son he never had. That single sentence, dripping with insincerity, had planted the seed of doubt in my mind. It had fueled my suspicion, prompting me to dig deeper, to uncover the truth beneath Belle's carefully constructed facade. Belle's always been like this, Silas said, his voice low and bitter. Even as kids, she always got what she wanted. She charmed everyone, manipulated everyone, until she got her way. He shared a story about a childhood incident, a forgotten birthday present, a subtle manipulation that had left him feeling small and insignificant. It was a small thing, but it resonated with me. I recognized the pattern, the insidious way Belle twisted situations to her advantage, leaving others feeling inadequate and confused. I should have seen it, Silas continued, his voice filled with self-recrimination. I should have known better. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Kevin, he said, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but is there any way I can make it up to you? I considered his question. What did I want from Silas? Revenge? Justice? Or something else entirely? There is one thing, I said finally. I need someone I can trust to help me run Knox Industries. Someone who knows the business inside and out. Someone who understands the importance of integrity and honesty. Silas's eyes widened, a flicker of hope igniting in their depths. You want me to work for you, I nodded. I'm offering you a chance to redeem yourself, Silas. A chance to prove that you're not the man Belle made you out to be. He swallowed hard, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. I won't let you down. He stood up, extending his hand. I grasped it, a silent agreement passing between us. As Silas left the office, a sense of closure washed over me. My revenge wasn't about destroying Belle. It was about reclaiming my life, my legacy, and building something better, stronger, than what she had tried to take away. And in a strange twist of fate, it was Silas, the man who had once been my adversary, who would help me do it. The payoff wasn't just the company, the money, the public vindication. It was the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had risen above the betrayal, rebuilt my life, and found an unlikely ally in the process.